Hey friends, Wilds of Eldraine previews have been dropping throughout this week, and today we just got to see some set booster exclusive cards. These are all cards that are not going to be found in the main set, and they're aimed directly at Commander players, so this is why I'm going to be covering them over here on the Commander channel. However, if you want to see all the main set cards that were also previewed today, head on over to Seth's video over on the main YouTube channel. I'm going to have a link to it in the video description and pinned in the comment section. And of course, if you want to see all the Wilds of Eldraine cards as they're being previewed, head on over to mtgpreviews.com. We have all the cards that have been previewed so far, and it's updated as cards are being released. And if you want to pre-order these sweet new cards from Wilds of Eldraine, you can head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and order all the other Magic the Gathering products you want from them as well. Alright, we begin with a familiar old face with Korvold, Gleeful Glutton. That's right, Korvold has gotten a makeover, and this time we have a much more fair version of him to talk about. This is an 8 mana Jund commander. However, he can cost up to 5 mana less because this spell costs 1 less to cast for each card type among permanents you sacrifice this turn. So he can cost as low as 3 mana or as high as 8. And what you get is a 4/4 legendary creature Dragon Noble with flying, trample, and haste, and whenever Korvold deals combat damage to a player, put X+1/+1 counters on Korvold and draw X cards, where X is a number of permanent types among cards in your graveyard. So in order to have cast Korvold for just 3 mana, you have to have sacrificed a land, a creature, an artifact, an enchantment, and a planeswalker. I think those are all the permanent types. Now, you can still sacrifice a land that is also a creature, an artifact, enchantment, and planeswalker somehow, but that would be very difficult. But there are stuff that have like 3 card types, for example. Regardless of how little or much you paid for Korvold though, the payoff is definitely worth it. He enters the battlefield, he has flying, trample, haste, he immediately hits, and he's going to be drawing you some amount of cards. Probably at least 2, I would say, because like cracking a fetch land and like cracking a Sakura Tribe Elder to ramp out a land is not very hard, so drawing like 2 or 3 cards is going to be really easy, and then you're going to also grow Korvold in the process. So the card is still powerful, but it's just not as powerful as the original version, which I think is just a good thing. So how do you build this new version of Korvold? Well, I don't think it's just like an easy swap between the original Korvold, because the original Korvold had no real hoops to jump through. Like the hoops were there, but they were very small. All you had to do was sacrifice anything. So you sacrifice your fetch lands, you sacrifice your treasure tokens, and then suddenly Korvold draws a billion cards and gets enormously huge and 2-shots or even 1-shots opponents. Whereas this one actually is more like a Baba's Saga type card, where it actually cares about the card types that you're sacrificing and have in your graveyard. So with this version, you're going to have to be focusing on cards that have multiple card types, like Brea's Apprentice is a creature artifact that also makes an artifact creature token, and is a sacrifice outlet for artifacts. Or stuff that makes everything an extra card type, like if you have a Shy on the battlefield, all your creatures are now going to also be lands, so they count as 2 permanent types when they're sacrificed. So there's definitely harder hoops to jump through with the new Korvold, but I think that's a good thing, because Korvold Fakir's King, the original, is just always going to be high powered. You can't really build a janky version of it. Trust me, I've seen people do every different version of janky Korvold, and it just takes over like actual like janky tables. Like you can't just sit down with a original Korvold and play against precon decks. You're just going to destroy them. However, now we have an alternative. If you want to play that Korvold style of action, if you really like the character, for example, now you have a objectively much weaker version of the original that is probably way better suited at playing at mid-power tables, at low-power tables. So it's great to have multiple options. We have Korvold, the original, for high-power tables, and now we have a version for mid to low-power tables. So that's great. Variety is great. Something for everyone is great. Moving on, though, we have another brand new commander. This is Brennard, Ginger Sculptor, and this is like Bant Parnhamanarchon Aristocrats Food Golem commander. This was really wild. It's a 4-mana Bant 3/3 legendary creature, Human Artificer, and it says each creature controlled that's a food or a golem gets +2/+2 and has trample, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 food golem artifact creature in addition to its other types, and it has pay 2, tap it, sacrifice this artifact, you gain 3 life. So Brennard's main power is the fact that whenever your creatures are dying or whenever you're sacrificing your creatures, you get a free token copy of it, and that allows you to reuse Enter the Battlefield triggers and powerful death triggers as well. And then, yeah, they're 1/1s, so they're probably nerfed a little bit, but they're, with Brennard on the battlefield at least, they're going to be 3/3s of trample as well, so they can at least fight a little bit. So the way I would build Brennard is I would look at powerful sacrifice engines. Like Greater Good is a great way to sacrifice your creatures for extra value. You're drawing some cards. You're filling your graveyard for extra recursion options. And then the copies that Brennard are making are tokens, so you can double up on those tokens with Anointed Procession, and they're also foods, so they actually have a cool interaction with Academy Manufactor, where you're making a food token, so you actually get to make a food, clue, and treasure token. Though my editor said some like rule weirdness might make the creature enter the battlefield as like a regular food with the Manufactor, not like a food token like Brennard would suggest it would. So I don't know, judges, let me know if there's any rule clarifications in the comment section. I'm a little bit confused. My head exploded. But yeah, Brennard looks really cool. I think this is like Bant Aristocrats with token synergies and maybe Panharmonicon synergies. And you can also just build him as like a food golem deck. Like, why not? That sounds like a blast. All right, and then we've got a new cycle of courts. There is one for each monocolor. 4 of them cost 4 mana, the green one costs only 3 mana, and each of them enter the battlefield and you become the monarch, and then each of them have an upkeep trigger. They have one upkeep trigger if you are not the monarch, and then they have a different, usually way stronger version of that same upkeep trigger if you are the monarch. So we're going to start with the white one with Court of Ardenvale. So it's 4 mana, when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand, but if you're the monarch, you return that permanent card to the battlefield instead. So this court is just like straight gas. This is basically the Court of the Sun Titan. It's getting your fetch lands that you crack earlier before playing Court of Ardenvale, and that's just straight up ramp in white. It gets all your utility cards that are small, like if you have a Knight of the White Orchid, or you have like a Weathered Wayfarer, or if you had like a land tax that got blown up, or you have like a Mana Rock that got blown up or something like that. It gets all these small utility cards back from the graveyard directly onto the battlefield if you're the monarch. So this card is really, really sweet. And a common thread with all of these is I don't think they're very much worth it unless you are the monarchy on your upkeep. If you're not the monarch, then these cards are going to be kind of bad, but I mean, they easily become the monarch. If you have any ways of like blinking these enchantments or any ways of stealing the monarch really reliably, then these cards are just like straight gas. So the white one, absolutely fantastic. The blue one is also very cool. So the blue one says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose up to one other target enchantment or artifact. It doesn't have to be your own enchantment or artifact. It could be just any on the battlefield. If you're the monarch, you may create a token that's a copy of it. And if you're not the monarch, you can have this Court of Vantress become the copy of it, except it has this ability. So making tokens of the best enchantment or artifact on the battlefield is really, really sweet. I mean, copying the best artifact enchantment is also really sweet. Like if somebody has like a Smothering Tide or like a Rhystic Study or something like that, copying it doesn't really matter. If making a token copy of it would be way better, but like just copying it is always going to be really, really good. I think this one has a lot of potential in like token style decks. If you have any way of like doubling tokens, this can get really out of control very, very quickly. Brutaclad, for example, really loves it. And it could be really strong in like enchantresses, where you just like copy your best enchantment and then you trigger Constellation when the token enters the battlefield and stuff like that. And it is in itself an enchantment, so it has extra layers of synergies there. So this card is really, really cool. And then we have the black enchantment. This is Court of Locthwain. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile a top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. If you're the monarch, until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with Court of Locthwain without paying its mana cost. So this is card theft. It's card advantage, but it's like inferior card advantage than just straight up drawing a card, because in 2023 every single deck is basically a synergy deck, so you're much more happy drawing cards from your own deck that benefit with your synergy pieces than stealing cards from your opponent's decks where they have synergy pieces and payoffs that you don't really get to benefit from. It's still good, obviously, but drawing cards from your own deck and playing them for free is a lot better than drawing cards from your opponent's deck and playing them for free. However, it is casting from exile. So decks like Prosper or anything that cares about casting stuff from exile and gets benefits from it, regardless of where what card you're actually casting, is going to get a lot of benefit out of Court of Locthwain. So I think this card is going to be really good gas in Prosper decks and anything else that deals with like casting stuff from exile. I can just think of Prosper off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's other ones as well. So this card is also very cool. The next one is Court of Embereth, and this upkeep trigger is actually quite different from the other ones we looked at. So this is the red one, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 3/1 red knight creature token. Then if you're the monarch, Court of Embereth deals X damage to each opponent, where X is a number of creatures you control. So unlike the other ones where you have an upkeep trigger that's kind of bad and then it gets upgraded when you are the monarch, this one has two different abilities, and either one happens or both happens instead. So this one is you always create a night creature token, and then if you're the monarch, you're also creating a night creature token, but also you're burning your opponent for a ton of damage. And I thought this one is kind of like bad when I first read it, because the other ones are all like, oh, this is sweet card advantage, this is sweet mana advantage, I love drawing cards, I love making mana, and like that's true, but this one actually can produce a lot of damage. Like, you're making a creature token each turn, and that's actually a blocker for the monarchy, which is kind of sweet. But then, like, let's say you have like 5 creatures, you have the monarchy, and then on your upkeep you create a creature token, and then you burn everybody for 6. Like, that's a lot of damage. So I don't know which particular decks are going to love running Court of Embereth, but anything that deals with burning and can like double the damage output of non-combat spells, like maybe like Soulfim, for example, is going to really, really like this. So I think this card is actually quite good. Like, it's probably better played than it actually looks. It doesn't draw cards, it doesn't make mana, but like it does a lot of damage potentially, which is pretty fun. And then the final one actually doesn't cost 4 mana. This one costs 3 mana. It's the green one, Court of Garenbrig. This one says, at the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. Then if you're the monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. All right, so the first upkeep trigger, it's fine. You're putting +1/+1 counters on stuff. But then doubling the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature, that's really good. That's gonna kill people really fast. I like that a lot. So I like both these. I like both these aspects a lot. I love that you're always going to get 2 +1/+1 counters on stuff, and then that's going to feed into the second part where you double it. So you're getting at least 4 counters on stuff. But like if you're in a +1/+1 counter deck, which is where you're going to run this card, you're going to get way more counters than just 4 when you double it with the monarchy. So this card is going to be really good. I think if you're in a +1/+1 counter deck, you're probably going to be eyeballing this one pretty hard. And if you're in a +1/+1 counter deck, you're probably one of the best suited to actually protecting the monarchy, because they're going to have just like the biggest creatures on the battlefield. So Court of Garenbrig's really, really solid. And I like that it's just 3 mana too. That makes me like it even more. Card is gas. All right, the final card that is brand new today, previewed from the Set Booster exclusive cards, is Throne of Eldraine, which is, hey, that's the name of the movie. Well, in the name of the previous set. It's a 5 mana legendary artifact. It's colorless, and it's a big old mana rock for basically monocolor spells. So as it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. You can tap it to add 4 mana of the chosen color. Spend this mana only to cast monocolored spells of that color. And you can pay 3 and tap it to draw 2 cards. Spend only mana of the chosen color to activate this ability. So I saw some takes on the internet as soon as this card was revealed that this is going to be a new monocolor staple, but I just don't agree. I think maybe if this was like in 2015 or something, then yeah, sure, Throne of Eldraine would be like a mono white staple because it ramps very well. Like 5-drop tapping for 4 is actually a pretty solid rate, and it draws cards in an okay rate as well too. And if this was like 2015 or something, then I would say, yeah, mono white struggles to ramp and struggles to draw cards, so this would be a way of doing that. Or even in like mono red as well, mono white, mono red could use it. But in 2023, I think we just have more efficient options to draw cards and more efficient options to ramp in those colors, and basically any monocolor deck, honestly. Synergy pieces kind of just take over in terms of these generic type of cards that work in any monocolor deck. So I think this card isn't an auto-include in monocolor decks, but I think that it will have a home in particular decks. Like if I had a very high-costed commander, like 7 mana or 8 mana even, that was monocolored, I would use Throne of Eldraine to help me ramp into it. That's for sure. Or if I had any shenanigans of untapping Throne of Eldraine, then I would be much more interested in it as well, because it taps for 4 mana. So if I could untap it with like Voltaic Keys and whatever, if my deck was already running Voltaic Keys, then that's a ton of mana output. So there are going to be decks that I'm going to be excited to try out Throne of Eldraine, but I definitely don't think of it as like a monocolor staple. It needs a home that can actually synergize with what it's doing. So those were all of these set boosters previewed today from Wilds of Eldraine. If you want to see the main set cards that were previewed today, then head on over to Seth's video. I have it linked in the video description in the comment section. And if you want to see all the previews from Wilds of Eldraine, head on over to mtgpreviews.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, because tomorrow the pre-constructed decks are going to be fully revealed. I'm going to be covering all the brand new cards from them and all the reprints. And then I'm going to be doing pre-con upgrade guides later on in the week. So be sure to like and subscribe and check back tomorrow for all the pre-con goodies. And until next time, friends, see ya!